We're almost 1 week into the season and I'm currently rank 1 on the leaderboards, which actually doesn't mean anything, but if my mom was alive, she would be proud. I have to warn you though, this build is pretty hardcore and I think I'm above 300 APM actions per minute whilst playing this build. There's a lot of complex rotations, there are breakpoints with the gear that you have to hit. Basically what I'm saying, it's not a very casual friendly build. However, Dioxide from Maxroll has actually made a really good video for beginners to this build for you to get started, but consider this video more of like a hardcore version for those of you who really want to push the limits of the rogue in season 7. Before I go into the gear, there are two things you need in order to play this build. You need 150 energy and you need your rain of arrows to be at 10-second cooldown or less. In my case, my Beastfall boots alone with the master working along with the cooldown reduction on my amulet gets me to tick those two boxes. If you don't have that level of gear yet, you can use Tybalt's Will, the pants, to get extra resource. You can run a potion, and in terms of the cooldown reduction, you can temper rain of arrows cooldown reduction on your rings if you really need it. And remember, if you're using the Vex rune and the new aspect that gives you ultimate skill ranks, this also reduces the cooldown of rain of arrows. Onto my gear that I use for my tier 130 clear, a really good Sky Hunter, Beastfall boots with double masterwork for the 150 resources. Got a bunch of defenses on my pants along with the Vex rune for the skill ranks, really helps. Got some resistance on my gloves to make up for the rest of the build. And of course, false death, nothing comes close. Kyle the Nameless, the double dipping of trick attacks is just too good. We're trying to pick up as much distant damage as possible, so that's what I'm tempering, along with the Arrow Storm aspects, and then the two new ultimate aspects that the Blizzard added to the game, and of course the staple for this build, Word of a Khan. Quick shout out to Soothing Spices, the incense, for pushing us above 1000 armor along with over 70 all res. When it comes to the witch powers, feel free to pause the video and copy what I'm doing. It's essentially just whatever adds the most damage and applies to vulnerable, because we don't have a consistent way to do that. In terms of the skills, we just put 1 point in Barrage to trigger our Beastfall boots. And one great thing about this build is you don't need any movement speed, because the only way I move around is with dash. The rest of the skill points are pretty self-explanatory, and when it comes to the Paragon board, we're just trying to pick up as much damage as we possibly can. That means critical strike damage for our precision key passive and any distant damage that we can find to boost our rain of arrows multiplicative bonus that it provides at rank 5. For all the specific details of this build, remember there's a link in the description. One thing to note is the Dance Macabre note. It almost gives us double damage if we use a subterfuge or mobility skill before we use rain of arrows. So this pretty smoothly transitions us into talking about the rotation for playing this build. The short version is all I'm doing is clicking Q, W, E. Darkstride or Concealment, Rain of Arrows, Barrage. And then I just repeat that over and over. And then if I'm finding something that survives, like a boss or an elite pack in a pit push scenario, then I throw my smoke grenade and my caltrops. And in between all of those actions, I just right click to dash. And that's the only way I move my character is through dash. So what this looks like for me playing is I click Q, W, E, right click. Q, W, E, right click. I'm essentially playing the piano, and I'm moving at the speed of light, killing everything on my path, covering the entire infernal hordes with arrows. The monsters die before they even spawn. I've honestly had a lot of fun with this build. Now, one huge disclaimer. There's one aspect to this build that makes it almost impossible to play, but in reality, it just adds a bit of complexity to the gameplay. And what I'm talking about is guaranteeing that our Rain of Arrows is the skill that triggers our precision key passive, because it's very easy to end up on the wrong cycle and having our Barrage skill triggering precision, which we do not want. The way precision works, you gotta cast 3 marksman skills, and then the 4th cast will have a huge damage increase. So for this build, we're casting 1 barrage, 1 rain of arrows, and then another barrage to prepare for our 4th cast being rain of arrows. And because the only visual for our precision is a little icon that disappears amongst all the buffs that our character has, we have to kind of intuitively understand whether or not we're on the right cycle with our skills. So to help with this, first off, when I enter a dungeon or a pit, the first thing I do is I cast a barrage. This puts us in the right cycle. Then we throw a rain of arrows, that's our 2nd stack. We cast another barrage, that's our 3rd stack, and now our rain of arrows will be on the 4th cast, which is the precision trigger. But if you get crowd controlled or pushed around in the dungeon, maybe you have a bit of lag or you're clicking too fast, it is very easy to get off the cycle. And the better gear you have, the quicker you will notice the difference of being off the cycle or on the cycle. When I was pushing tier 130 in the pit, I was dealing 0 damage if I was off the cycle. So then I would have to throw 2 barrages in a row and then continue my QWE spam. So the gameplay of this build is essentially constantly paying attention to, hey, am I dealing as much damage as I'm supposed to be? Am I seeing those 5 trillion damage crits? Or am I just tickling my enemies? So what this build comes down to is shortening the gap between when you end up on the wrong cycle and when you notice and fix it. All I can say is you'll either love or hate this. I've actually really enjoyed this challenge and complexity to the gameplay, because normally Diablo 4 is pretty easy to play. I mean, even Elon Musk went undetected. So in order to play the best rogue build for Season 7, you have to potentially damage your wrists and damage your brain from dealing with all the precision nonsense. Or, you know, you can go watch Dioxide's video where he has a bit of a simpler version that also clears all the content in the game just fine. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, leave them below. See ya!